Sound check. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory. We're here today to get a lecture from Dave Larson, who is a member of the Park Service, 14-year veteran, and he's going to talk about Joshua Tree and dark skies. And my name is Ron Treat. I'm a docent here, which means they allow me to play with the telescopes, and I get a chance to do tours once in a while. So we want to bit of a shout out to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory Foundation. It's by their good graces that we're able to have these programs, such as the one as you're seeing. So if you have an urge to donate, we are willing to have that donation accepted for you. So without further delay, I think it's time we introduce Dave Larson and let him explain how Joshua Tree is a dark sky place. Dave? I know he's back there. There he is.
There you go. Thank you, Ron. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory. Thank you for braving the weather and coming out on this rainy and blustery day. And thank you to Ron for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to the Library and Observatory Foundation for having me out this afternoon. So first, I think an introduction is appropriate. As Ron mentioned, I am Dave Larson. I work in the National Park for the National Park Service in Joshua Tree National Park as a park ranger. In addition to being a park ranger, I'm also the lead astronomy ranger, so I'm also known as a dark ranger. And I have the privilege and honor to work under some of the darkest night skies in Southern California. So as you probably have guessed, I'm pretty passionate about night skies and protecting that resource for future generations. In this afternoon's program, we're going to talk a little bit about the national park history. We're going to talk a little bit about current challenges that are happening at the national park. And then we're going to jump into that thing that I'm so very passionate about, and that's a naturally dark night sky. So we're going to jump right into this presentation. Like many national park presentations, they sometimes begin with a quote. And in the national park, most of the rangers use a quote from John Muir or Leopold or somebody like that. But today is very special and different. We start with a quote from Simon and Garfunkel. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. So that being said, it's park headquarters in 29 Palms, California. In 1956, as part of the Mission 66 project, park services were expanded. And look at that, visitation hit 408,000 at that time. That's the little Cottonwood Visitor Center off of I-10 near Chiracco Summit. And then this was a big deal. In 1994, the United States Senate passed the Desert Protection Act, and Joshua Tree National Monument became a national park. With that became a big surge in visitation. We hit 1 million visitors per year in 1994. In 2011, Joshua Tree National Park celebrated 75 years of federal protection. Visitation went up to 1.3 million visitors per year in 2011. The way that people use the national park is one of my favorite things to observe and witness in the park, is the way people just take joy and pleasure in recreating in the national park. People come to the national park for hiking, camping. We are on the Pacific Flyway, so we get migratory birds in the national park. Of course, night skies and stargazing is an activity. In spring, we get this wonderful array of wildflowers that pop up. Rock climbing happens in the park. Joshua Tree National Park is a world-class rock climbing destination. It's the site of school field trips. Then there's the Desert Institute, which is like grown-up field trips, which is fun. And then, of course, every year in fall, the Joshua Tree National Park does a night sky festival which is a weekend-long celebration of all things night sky related. Some of the unique things about Joshua Tree National Park is it's the home of two distinct desert ecosystems. So on the north side of the park, you have this higher elevation of the Mojave Desert with tens of thousands of Joshua trees. On the southern half of the park, you've got a lower elevation Colorado desert ecosystem. Joshua Tree is home to some really fascinating geology. There are 5 palm oases in Joshua Tree National Park, and these palm oases are remarkable places where water naturally trickles out of the ground, palm trees grow, and these were very important places to the indigenous peoples of this region. I really like the gold mining history in the park. It's amazing the way these hardy individuals came out to the middle of nowhere in the summer and were trying to scratch mineral wealth out of this landscape. And a lot of those old artifacts are still left behind in the park. There's hikes that go to old gold mines and gold miner cabins and that sort of thing. And of course, it's home to the iconic namesake Joshua Tree, which is kind of a symbol of the Mojave Desert. This is another interesting thing, is that Joshua Tree National Park is considered a gateway national park. So the national parks receive each year tens of thousands of visitors from around the globe, from Europe. And often these families from Europe will fly into Los Angeles International Airport, rent a car, and Joshua Tree National Park is the first national park that they visit on a trip that might include a dozen national parks. So because this is the first area and park that they visit, this is considered a gateway community and a gateway park. Another thing that makes Joshua Tree National Park special when compared to some other national parks is when you look at the area around Joshua Tree National Park, the communities around Joshua Tree National Park are home to tens of millions of residents between LA County, San Diego County, Riverside counties. A whole lot of people call Joshua Tree National Park their home national park, or the park that's in their backyard. And with that, and the increased popularity of national parks, comes increased visitation, and I want to take just a moment to touch on that. So this is a data graph. It shows visitation at the national parks dating all the way back to 1911. And if you look at this graph, you can see some steady increases in visitation. You can see that call-out label in 1990, visitation hit 1 million. And then for the next 24 years, visitation hovered between 1 and 1.5 million visitors per year. That's pretty steady and consistent. But look at what happened in 1914, 16, 18, 2021. We're now above 3 million visitors per year. So that marks really dramatic growth. You guys all remember the COVID-19 pandemic that drug on for so long and was protracted and prolonged and was such an impact on our life. When we look at that whole pandemic on this data chart, it looks like one little speed bump on a big long road. You can see in 2021, there was or 2020, just a slight dip in visitation due to the pandemic. People were still coming to the park and recreating. And with this increase in visitation, the park has experienced some growth pains, challenges, those kind of things. And those include very long lines at the park entrance, campgrounds that are almost always full. We have to turn a lot of people away for camping. Trailhead parking lots are often full, which means people can't hike the popular trails. They have to go elsewhere to recreate. We've got stresses to infrastructure, resource damage, staffing challenges, budget challenges, and then one of the big humps that we're getting over is public expectations of what to expect when you come to a national park. So today, when you come to a national park, it does require a little planning, and it's helpful if you don't come on a holiday weekend. If you come on a holiday break, holiday weekend, anytime that elementary schools are on break, you can expect to find very, very big crowds, long waits, parking lots that are filled to capacity. And if you want to come camp in the national park, we definitely recommend you make a reservation. So those are some of the challenges that we're dealing with. And of course, the reason I'm here this afternoon is to talk to you about the thing that I love and the thing that I'm so passionate about, and that's the park at night. There's a great saying that half the park is after dark, and it's so true. So here you can see the entrance to the park with the Milky Way striking across the sky overhead. It's such a majestic sight, and it's something that is elusive. The conditions aren't always this good. When we look at the National Park Service mission, the National Park Service preserves unimpaired the natural and cultural resources and values of the national park system for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of this and future generations. You know, if you go all the way back to when the National Park Service was founded in 1916, this mission statement was kind of focused about protecting plants and animals. There were plants that numbers were on the decline. Animals, numbers were on the decline. They were on the, we were worried about some of these species going extinct. It wasn't until more recently that park rangers began looking at a naturally dark night sky as a resource that needed protection. So out in the middle of the national park, we have a naturally dark night sky, one that's free from most sources of light pollution. Now, in a natural world, in a natural environment, there are natural sources of light and natural rhythms to those natural sources of light, and one of the big ones is the moon. We all know that the moon each night changes a little bit. It goes through these phases, everything from a new moon, which is a dark night, to a full moon, which is a pretty bright night. But this is a natural phenomenon that the plants and animals have adapted to and enjoy and need. So some sources of light are good and natural. So starlight and galactic light are just light that's emitted from our own stars in the sky and the Milky Way. Zodiacal light is faint sunlight that's scattered by interplanetary dust, but it's also a source of natural light. So these are all good natural light sources that happen at night and can be observed. And on a natural landscape, animals greatly depend on this resource of a dark night sky. Dark night skies help migratory animals. They help nocturnal predators be successful. In the national park, a lot of animals do come out at night. So, of course, owls, bats, fox. You know, if we go back to the earliest civilizations of mankind, our species, human beings, have used a naturally dark night sky for so many things. To tell us when to harvest crops, when to plant crops, how to navigate the seas, what time of season it is. So a naturally dark night sky has been used by our species for generations. If you go back to 1610, Galileo used a very primitive telescope to observe the moons around Jupiter, and those became known as the Galilean moons. And then in 1879, that crafty Thomas Edison filed a patent for a light bulb. And what a great invention this was, right? Because this came at a time when we were lighting our homes and streets with torches and candles, right? And here comes this guy with a light bulb. What a great invention. And now we have Las Vegas. And we have light pollution. And light pollution is a serious threat to a naturally dark night sky. I guarantee you, if you're in downtown Las Vegas at night, you're not seeing the Milky Way. You might not even see a single star because there's so much light pollution. So this is a view of the globe at night from space. You can see the populated areas. You can see a lot of light pollution in the whole eastern side of the United States, quite a bit up in Europe there. So this is a chart of population, and you can see how the population, world population in billions, was pretty flat for a long time. And then as we approach the year 2000, look at what happened. We got a whole lot more people on the earth. And with all those people on the earth, we're all burning a light bulb at night, right? Whether it's in our cars, our homes, the local strip mall. So if you guys remember just how excited our nation was in the 50s when we started sending Apollo missions to the moon and when we started launching satellites, that allowed us to go up into space and look back at planet Earth at night and actually see where light pollution was happening. We could see the illuminated cities at night. So this is what it looked like in the 1950s. You can almost pick out the biggest cities like New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco. You can see them there. It got a little more light polluted in 1970, even more so in 1997. And then today we have something that resembles this. So what I'd like you to do when looking at this graph is I want you to, instead of looking at the light polluted areas, I want you to focus on the dark areas up here in the top left in the 1950s. A lot of dark area, right? And then as time goes on, those dark areas become fewer and fewer. You know, it's surprising that it was the Nixon administration that enacted the Endangered Species Act. And the Endangered Species Act is a very effective tool at protecting plants and animals whose numbers are declining. If we place a plant or an animal species on a Endangered Species Act list, it provides federal protection. But we can't put the night sky on the endangered species list. It doesn't have a scientific name. But nevertheless, a dark night sky free from light pollution is something that is declining in numbers. And it's something that each of us should care about and make some effort to try to protect, because this is something that we strive to protect for future generations. So we have old pictures and new pictures. So this is a view from Mount Wilson. And you can see the light pollution in 1908 compared to 2007. A striking difference in what you're observing from Mount Wilson. So I actually lived in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley in 1994 when the big Northridge earthquake hit. And when the Northridge earthquake hit in the wee hours of the morning in 1994, power across the city went out. It was literally pitch black. You couldn't turn on a light bulb unless you had a generator. So interestingly, 911 call centers lit up with phone call after phone call. People were in a panic about what was that gassy cloud overhead in the sky. They were seeing the Milky Way for the first time in their life. Isn't that amazing that for the first time in their life, they were seeing the Milky Way and it took an earthquake to happen? They could have saw it if they traveled to Joshua Tree National Park, but if you stay in LA, you might not know what the Milky Way looks like. And sure enough, people called 911 on the Milky Way. True story. So the level of a dark night sky is measured on what's called a Bortle scale. And in Joshua Tree National Park, in the darkest places of the park, we're kind of in the Bortle scale 2.5. And in other areas of the park, we get into Bortle 3.5, but kind of in that blue region. If you can see the chart on the bottom, Joshua Tree National Park is in the blue region. So we have very close to where we are right now, a short 45-minute drive. Everybody here in Rancho Mirage can take a quick 45-minute drive and get into a Bortle 3 sky, which is a great thing to have in your backyard. live in a place where they can't see the Milky Way. So what can be done? There's a lot that you and I can do to help address light pollution. One of the big things is to use light only when needed. So rather than leave a porch light on all night long, perhaps it's better to use a timer, or even better, a motion sensor to turn that light on only when you need it or only when there's motion. It's also important to light only where needed. So at my house, I make a conscious effort to make sure my exterior lighting is only lighting my property and doesn't infringe on my neighbor's property. The big one is to use fully shielded lighting. So you want to look around your house and make sure that the lighting you have at your house is shielded from above so that the light is directed down. You don't want the light to kick up into the sky. That's wasted light, and it contributes to light pollution. So shield the light fixtures from above. And then, of course, you can also get into more refined things like the temperature of the light. Warmer colors are better. And I also like this one. Use less light. If you've got a porch light with a 100-watt bulb, maybe a 40-watt bulb would be better. So this touches on light trespass a little bit. You can see the two examples in the photo. The bottom one is the one we're going for. We want light to be directed down and only on our property, to not trespass into our neighbor's property. So there's a good little illustration. This illustration demonstrates the different levels of shielding. So you can see the really bad stuff is on the left, and what we're looking for to achieve, hopefully, is over there on the right with a full cutoff, shielded from above. And an example of different lighting temperatures. So warmer is better. And in the lighting world, it's measured in Kelvin, so that's the K. And there's a lot of reasons to use light more responsibly. So the motivation to use light more responsibly is, of course, less energy consumption. You can save a few dollars on your light bill. Less energy consumption, less light trespass, so happy neighbors. Minimizes impact on the natural world. We want to be kind to our feathered and furry friends out in the animal world. They rely on a naturally dark night sky. And of course, better view of the stars. That's why we should use less light. You know, a lot of people say, well, I want my yard to be lit up because of security. And while that's good, more light doesn't always mean more secure. Here's an example of how a really bright light can blind you as an observer. You guys probably can't see the guy standing in the gateway, but he's there. And then another thing that's big is not only looking at what we do at home to protect a naturally dark night sky, but to look in our community and see if there's any gross light polluters. One of the most effective tools at addressing light pollution is called a lighting ordinance, and that's where a municipality or a local government or a city or a county enacts a lighting ordinance that's night sky friendly. And that's such an effective tool because it ensures that all future construction is constructed in a manner that's night sky friendly. And I just want to point out that one of the best resources for all this light pollution stuff that I'm talking about is the International Dark Sky Association. They've got a website that's really easy to remember. It's darksky.org. I love this part of the presentation. We talk about a few successes that exist. So this is the Chisos Basin in Big Bend National Park in a before and after retrofit of responsible lighting. You can see big improvements there. Another before and after photo in Chile. They retrofitted the street lamps there with better street lamps that were more night sky friendly, And look at that improvement. That is remarkable. This is from the Grand Canyon. You can see a before and after retrofit. The image on the left is just clearly too much light and gross light pollution. And the National Park made changes, changed out the lighting fixtures, and now they have a much more pleasant and night sky friendly lighting situation there at the Arizona room. Similar thing on the El Tovar location, a before and after. So some great examples of how improvements can be made using less light, not more. And again, the International Dark Sky Association is a great resource to learn more about that stuff. And the National Park Service has their own Natural Sounds and Night Skies division. A bunch of hardworking folks there in the visits different national parks. They measure the natural soundscape and measure light pollution, and they're basically scientists who are striving to measure light pollution and to collect data on that. So one thing important about national parks is when you look at communities and municipalities and the way they grow and the way they emit more light pollution, it's great that we have national parks across the United States, because national parks are just such a wonderful resource, not just for recreation, hiking, camping, birding, and all that stuff. For the most part, all national parks are wonderful places to enjoy a naturally dark night sky. In 2017, Joshua Tree National Park was established and designated as an international dark sky park. Becoming an international dark sky park is not an easy task. Joshua Tree National Park is almost 800,000 acres. It's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. We had to take an inventory of every light fixture in the park and categorize it and replace it if it wasn't in compliance. Another thing about being an international dark sky park is it kind of obligates us to kind of do community outreach and talk about light pollution. That's part of why I'm here today. And I have the pleasure of working with a couple individuals at the national park who are very introverted, geeky scientists. They would struggle to get up here on the stage and talk to you about what they do. So I'm happy to talk about what they do. So we have a couple of scientific staff, technicians, and on the darkest night of the month, on a new moon, when conditions are good, they take some specialized equipment up into the middle of the national park, and they point it to the south, to Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert and Palm Springs, and we can actually see and measure the light dome coming from these cities. And we measure this data and collect it because we want to know if the light pollution domes are getting bigger, if they're growing, and at what rate. Hopefully, if we continue to make changes at home, enact lighting ordinances and those kind of things, hopefully it would be a great joy to see a light dome go down instead of growing. That would just be a reason for celebration across the national park. And then as urban areas expand, places where a nocturnal landscape is naturally dark without artificial light, it becomes fewer in number. A naturally dark night sky is something that we are seeing diminish. Fewer and fewer places have a naturally dark night sky. And preserving this landscape is tremendously important. So important to many animal species, from mating, migrating, navigating, finding food. It all depends on a naturally dark night sky. And then it's interesting that not only do the animals enjoy the night sky, but some of us humans enjoy the night sky too. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, rock climbing in Joshua Tree National Park actually does happen at night. In the summer, it's just too darn hot to climb during the day. So some of us, including myself, have done some rock climbing in the park at night with a headlamp, and it's pretty remarkable to climb a rock face with the Milky Way striking overhead. It's really a memorable experience. We do get people that come into the park with very expensive cameras trying to get the shot, that amazing shot of the Milky Way with a very special object in the foreground like a Joshua tree, or in this case, Skull Rock. So night sky photography is a big thing in the park. We have people that, astronomers that come up into the park and set up telescopes, and some of them engage in a special discipline of astronomy called astrophotography. One of those individuals is Peter Eilot, who works at JPL NASA in Pasadena. I think he gets off work around Friday at 5 o'clock, and by 5:30, he's in that vehicle heading towards Joshua Tree National Park with a bunch of astronomy gear in the trunk. And when he gets to the park, he sets up his telescope, camera, laptop, and he's going at this all night long until the sun comes up, but he captures some amazing, amazing images. So this is one of the images he captured from the park of the Andromeda Galaxy. And of course, we like camping under the stars. There's nothing that beats camping under a naturally dark sky. I have had so many memorable experiences under the dark skies of Joshua Tree, from seeing the Milky Way to seeing a meteor shower. So camping is a very popular and special activity in the park. The annual Night Sky Festival, I'll take just a moment to mention that this year it's happening on October 14th at the Sky's the Limit Observatory, which is up near the north entrance of the national park. The Night Sky Festival is our annual celebration of all things night sky. And the one thing that I want to leave you folks with is, it's vital, is that you and I can make a difference. And if you don't think one person can make a difference, we can. Each of us can make small changes at home. We can combat light pollution. We can improve this situation. And again, there's resources out there. And I think collectively, as we all get on board with efforts to reduce light pollution, we can have a dramatic effect on this. And the main thing that I'm motivated to do is to protect this resource for future generations. We want our children's children to also be able to see the Milky Way like we did. I'm Park Ranger Dave Larson. Thank you for coming this afternoon. And I am happy to answer Q&A if you guys have any questions about anything related to the national park. I've worked in Joshua Tree National Park for about 14 years, and whether it's gold mining, wildlife, astronomy, whatever, I can answer questions. Yes?
Yes, you know the Acrisure Arena opened up recently.
I caught a hockey game there last week.
Well, December 18th, before 11 o'clock, that Sunday night, I went out to do my nightly check at the stars, and my whole sweet spot of the north was ruined because they had these stupid searchlights, advertising searchlights going around. And there are a lot of them. And I couldn't believe it. I thought that stuff was outlawed a long time ago.
They should be, and I'm surprised that they're doing that, and I didn't know that. But I'm willing to bet that Acrisure Arena wants to be a good neighbor and a good community partner. And I'll bet if some folks from the community said, hey, knock that off, you're ruining our night sky, they might be inclined to comply. And I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to attract attention to their new arena and their new hockey team. And they've been tremendously successful at that, and their games are almost selling out. So maybe it's time to turn off the huge lights.
Did you notice if they had downward lighting in the parking lots? Or?
You know what? I'm ashamed to say I was so excited to see the hockey game. I didn't really pay attention to the lighting in the parking lot. But now that you care and that you brought this up, by golly, I'm going to take a look at what they're doing, and I think we should all maybe have a little phone call with Acrisure Arena.
Well, it's just outside of city limits of Palm Desert, I believe. So I'm not sure who's responsible. So, county?
Thank you. Yeah, I would think it would be probably a county or city lighting ordinance that they would have to comply with. Yes, sir.
Do the national parks have any political pressure on the governments to set regulations on emissions of light? Because if you're just doing it locally, you can have some success, but you have a national pressure, it may be more successful.
Yeah, so there's not a federal lighting ordinance. Lighting ordinances usually fall to the county or city or even municipal level. I know that the counties are all looking at lighting ordinances as a tool, and it's becoming more common for counties and cities to enact and adopt lighting ordinances. So this is something that's gaining traction. I was wondering earlier why Lauren was wearing running shoes, and I just figured it out.
If you're not camping, are there any restrictions to traveling through the park at night?
What a great question. So if you're not camping in the national park, can you still go into the park in the middle of the night? Yes, the park is open 24 hours per day. People come in at all hours to enjoy the Milky Way, stargaze. Some of the darkest night skies in the park are on the southern part of the park, down by Cottonwood Campground and Cottonwood Visitor Center. On the other side of the park, the north side of the park, if you come in through the town of Joshua Tree, the first 3 picnic areas that you come to are designated stargazing areas. So yes, the park is open 24 hours for stargazing. Any other questions? In the back.
Great talk, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any research findings to demonstrate the effects of increased ground light in the Coachella Valley, say over the past 10, 20 years, as development has increased, the effects on bird migratory patterns going over the valley, this part of the Coachella Valley, as opposed to over Joshua Tree?
Well, so inside the national park, I mentioned that we have scientific staff that set up scientific equipment, and they can measure the light domes being emitted by municipalities outside the national park. So that is something that we can measure very accurately and quantify, and those data are being assembled over many years. So we do have a nice data set on that. Now, outside the national park, there's many universities and nonprofit organizations who have applied for research permits with the National Park Service to conduct scientific research inside the park. And in almost all cases, the National Park Service strives to provide those research permits because national parks are great places for scientific study and for academia. So there is research being done. I don't know of any research that comes to mind specifically about that issue, but I'm confident that it's being done. Yeah.
I assume the best time to see the stars is when there's no moon, but can you also see them, up until like a half moon, or sort of what's the range?
Absolutely. So, of course, the best time is a new moon. Yes, you can enjoy a wonderful night sky on a crescent moon. Once it gets to half full, that starts to be a considerable source of light pollution. So I would say as long as it's less than half full, you're in pretty good shape. Other things that contribute to that also, though, are, is it clear that night? Because even on no moon, if it's cloudy out, that's going to impact your ability to see the stars. And then the other thing can be time of year with respect to night sky observing. So summer months are much better for observing the Milky Way because we're seeing a part of the Milky Way that's more brilliant and more bright. Whereas the section of Milky Way that we see in winter, it's still beautiful, but not quite as spectacular. And also, depending on what time of year it is, it might dictate what night sky objects are visible at what time of night.
I may have missed, what's the relationship between the amount of air pollution and light pollution? In other words, in the Coachella Valley,
Correct.
we saw that one chart, but I didn't understand if Palm Desert is worse or better than Palm Springs because of air pollution or light pollution.
Great. So I'm glad you brought that up. So my talk focused mostly on light pollution, which is emission of light that makes it more difficult to see the stars up in the night sky. But I'm glad you brought this up because normal pollution, particulate matter emitted from industry, car exhaust, that can have an effect on your ability to see the night skies as well. Inside the national park, it's not a big issue because we don't have a lot of, we have good air quality inside the national park. But once you get into more populated regions, yes, pollution and smog can dramatically affect your ability to see the stars. Yeah.
No more questions?
Got one over here.
Oh, you got one over here. All right. Give Lauren a break. Remember to enunciate.
My favorite constellation is Orion, and I just love looking at Orion. It's coming up now. It's a winter constellation, and
That's right.
a lot of astronomers say winter's the best time to look at stars. I was just wondering, like, if, as far as the weather, if I was down here in the valley and I wanted to get up to Joshua Tree because it was a new moon, and
You bet.
Is there anything like they have on the top of the tram, for example, a tram camera that you can connect with on the internet that would say, "Oh, this is a great night. Come on up. The skies are clear." And
You know, the thing that I rely on for whether or not the sky is clear or not at a region is the National Weather Service. They're really good at that, and they've got an easy web address, weather.gov. So weather.gov, and what I love about weather.gov is you can type in a city like Joshua Tree, California, but then you can actually drag the map around and pinpoint a specific location like this picnic area, boom, and it'll give you the current and forecasted conditions, and it's usually pretty accurate. So that's something that you can use. The National Park Service does have a few webcams. They're not useful at night because all you see is dark, but during the day, there's some webcams up on top of the mountain that the public has access to. You can find those with a Google search. Yeah, you bet. Oh my gosh, you guys have been such a great group. Thank you again for coming out this afternoon. Thank you.
Now, before you go, we have one more announcement. We are offering several things here, thanks to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory Foundation. You just saw Dave Larson here from Joshua Tree. And at 3 o'clock, you might have a chance to catch an astronomer in their natural habitat in an observatory. So if you just assemble out here, just before you enter the library, you'll see a screen, big screen TV, showing you science stuff from astronomy. You'll probably get a tour of our observatory. All right, so you're welcome to join us for that. Thank you.